Afternoon, Rotary Club of Harrisburg, club number 23 in all the world. It's good to see everyone today. What a beautiful, beautiful Monday, isn't it? This is my all-time favorite time of the year. And the only thing that could be better is that I could have had my hair cut already, but that'll be another couple days in coming. Let's open our meeting with an invocation. Joe Bedard, where are you at in that list of people?
Thank you, Adeline. Sorry, I had muted and didn't know the toggle switch was yours. Hello, everyone. If you know a Beatles song called When I'm 64, the invocateur today gets to, on his 64th birthday, give the invocation. When I'm 64. The theme for today is I Can Breathe. In the Hebrew tradition, many words in their language mean different things, sometimes up to a dozen. One of the words for air is God. So in that belief system, when you're breathing in life, you're breathing in God. And if God is love, then we're breathing in love. Al Schmidt, a Rotary of Harrisburg member for over 50 years. When I looked up an old book, it was 51 years in 2017. He was in his 90s when I asked him at a meeting, what do you attribute your age, your ability to get to this age? He says, decades prior, a doctor told him, take deep breaths. And he took him at his word. And he said that is why he was in his 90s. So let's incorporate some yoga style breathing of breathing in love. So you breathe in the nose and out the nose. So each breath is a participation in a religious experience of love. So breathing in the nose. So fill the belly, midsection, upper section, ribs. Wow, feel that capacity that we don't use. We move our diaphragm 1 centimeter on average. Its capacity is 10 centimeters. So when you move your diaphragm, you're actually massaging your organs. It's called the second heart. So let's just take a couple breaths of breathing in love, and I can breathe for all of the citizens of the world in these times. Inhale. And exhale. Inhale. And exhale. That peacefulness is in all of us at all times. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Joe.
You're welcome.
Adeline, do we have our song ready to go there?
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets red glare, the bombs bursting
flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave.
That was a great selection, Adeline. Would you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
Allegiance
to the flag of the
of the
United States
of
of
America,
America and
and
to
to the republic for which it stands,
stands,
one
one
nation,
nation,
under
under
God,
God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with liberty and justice for all.
for all. And now, join me, if you will, in the Rotary four-way test. Of the things we think, say, or do, first, is it the truth? Second, is it fair to all concerned? Third, will it build goodwill and better friendships? And fourth, will it be beneficial to all concerned? Wow, my fellow Rotarians, let's just keep that front and center, shall we? I've got a few quick announcements for you today. And what is this? Rotary Roundup. Rotary Roundup. What is Rotary Roundup? Adeline, is there any way we can make that go away?
The best way to make it go away is just by answering the questions.
Oh, everybody needs to make a choice? Everybody needs to make a choice. If you have that little sign up on your screen, make your choice here if you could. What is Rotary Roundup? Is it A, a brand of weed killer? B, is it a tool used by cowboys? C, is it the Rotary Club of Harrisburg's weekly newsletter? Or is it D, none of the above? Everybody make your choice. One, going once, going twice, going 3 times. 97% say it is the Rotary Club of Harrisburg weekly newsletter, and 3% of everyone on the call today thinks that it is a brand of weed killer. So it is the Rotary Club of Harrisburg's weekly newsletter. It should show up in your email inbox every Friday. Make sure to read the roundup top to bottom, cover to cover, and share the stories that you see when you have an opportunity to do so. A great big thank you to Ski for taking minutes today. Ski, try to remember the four-way test, please, when you're reporting on that poll. Thank you, I appreciate it. And a great big thank you to our corporate members as well. We so appreciate your support. It helps us do many of the good things that we do in our community and in our world. So thank you there. Megan Bachmore, I'm not sure if Megan's here with us today, but Megan just joined the Rotary Club of Harrisburg. She is a representative from the Harrisburg Regional Chamber and CREDIC, one of our corporate sponsors. Good to have you in our club, Megan. Now check this out, if you could. Somehow, the Greenhouse Project. Does everyone remember the Greenhouse Project? Yeah, raise your hand if you remember the Greenhouse Project. Spearheaded by our very own tall, skinny billboard guy and past president, Andy Rebuck. That story somehow showed up on social media. I think our public image committee had something to do with that. So Brian Jones, Patty Petaprolu, and Chris and Cami Grimm, thanks for all that you did to help make this show up on social media. 4,365 people saw the story. 867 people engaged in some way. They clicked into that and I think we had like 80 shares or something. It was a pretty big number. So so we're using social media to tell some of the stories of what are going on here in the Rotary Club of Harrisburg. When you see those stories, don't just like them. Okay, we appreciate the likes, but hit the share button, and it helps get the word out there. And we appreciate that. This week's lunch money is being donated to the Rotary Foundation Polio Plus Fund. We are this close to eradicating polio. One of the great efforts that Rotary has done through the years is to work at eradicating polio. So if your lunch money is not included in your quarterly dues, or if you'd like to donate more, just bounce out to myrotary.org, click the donate button. It's easy peasy from there just to make an additional donation to the Polio Plus Fund. Another one of those polls. You would think we learned how to do something new on Zoom. So what major Rotary event began this past weekend and continues through Friday? Everyone make a choice. Is it Andy Reebok's Golf Classic? Is it Una Martone's Polio Plus Sneakers Fashion Show? Is it the Rotary International first virtual convention? Or is it all of the above? Or none of the above? Everybody make your choice. Going once, going twice, going 3 times. And most of you got it right. A few people said all of the above. I don't know, Una, maybe we're going to have to do something with that. But it is the Rotary International Convention. It is happening virtually, and it is happening virtually right now. It's absolutely free. You can go out to riconvention.org, click on that link, and you'll be able to sign up to actually sit in on some of the classes. They're super interesting, and you can learn a lot about Rotary. So we want to take a few minutes to turn the mic over to one of our members, Karen Cullings, and she's going to take a few minutes just to tell us a little bit about herself. Karen?
Morning, everybody. Do you have my screen?
You are up.
Okay. Well, you've asked a librarian to do a classification talk, so you should all be very afraid, but it's all good. I didn't organize my slides according to Dewey Decimal, so we should be able to move through quickly. I'm a native of Carlisle, born and bred. I was the 4th of 5 siblings. This is a picture of me giving my first speech. I think it went something like, put the camera down and let's get this cake thing started. I loved reading from the time I was a small child because this young woman here read to me, my older sister, all the time. And of course, I loved going to the library because there were lots of books there and I could get away from my 2 brothers there. So it's probably not a big surprise that my first job, both volunteer and paid, was with the Basel Free Library in Carlisle. I worked there while I was going to high school and I loved that job. I graduated from Carlisle Senior High School, and with my deep love of reading intact and a paralyzing fear of math. After schooling, I've led a kind of varied work life. I've done everything from being a sales associate in retail to clerical work to being in magazine publishing and owning and helping to operate 2 computer consulting businesses with my husband, in addition to my library work. I've also managed to attend quite a few of our institutions of higher learning around here. You can see my list here. I will give a shout out to Ski wherever he is, because Hack was the place where I managed to overcome my math phobia, among other things. The only place from this list that I haven't gotten a degree so far is Clarion. I'm currently enrolled in the Master of Library and Information Science program there. I hope to complete that next year. I have one daughter who's named Anthea, and she went far too quickly from this to this. You know, you feel old when your child shares her LinkedIn page with you, but I'm very proud of her. She's a Temple grad, and she's currently enrolled in the Master of Public Health program at UIC, and what a time to be in public health. I live in New Cumberland. I've lived in this region all my life, moved around the different burgs. This is my little stone house in New Cumberland. I remarried in 2015, and yes, that's the library steps. We got married on the steps of the library. My husband's retired now, but he was for many years a firefighter and fire chief and a trainer, and he's also a published author. This is his book here in the middle. And when I'm not working and going to school, which is precious little time these days, I have a number of other interests. Of course, I have a book club. What else would you think? But I enjoy gardening and writing and working with the pet rescue that I volunteer with. These are my two rescues. This is Bella and Tia. And of course, I'm now the executive director of the Dauphin County Library System, which right now means that I've been providing some guidance as we pivoted quickly from delivering service out of buildings to delivering service digitally and through our outreach van. And of course, the reopening plans that we're now engaged in, we've started to reopen the system again. And as you can see, it means I'm still standing up on things in order to talk to people. I joined Rotary as part of Colonial Park Rotary originally, and then when I took the executive director position, I was told that the Harrisburg Club was the happening place to be, so I joined here, and I'm happy to say that your reputation is intact. You are, in fact, a happening place to be. I really enjoy Rotary. I've learned an awful lot here. The two things that make the biggest impression on me are the investment that you put into mentoring and into education, and I value that because those are two things that had a very positive impact on my life, and I'm honored to be part of a group that makes that happen for our community and for the wild world. So, wild world. Well, it is a wild world right now, wide world. So I thank you for allowing me to be a Rotarian with you and letting me share my story with you today.
Thank you, Karen.
You're welcome.
Yeah, nicely done. Everybody stop by the Dauphin County Library and look Karen up and say hi and check out a book and the stuff you do at libraries. So good job. We so appreciate you, and it's good to have you here with us. Introducing our speaker today, I believe, is going to be John Moorfield. And again, just a little housekeeping item that as our speaker is presenting today, remember to use the chat function to ask questions. And when we get down to the end of that presentation, then I'll be working off of your chat to field questions to our speaker. John?
Thanks, James. When earlier this year, we collectively watched as schools and colleges hastily closed their doors in early March. Students were asked to embrace this new idea of virtual learning after, and many for the first time. One of the most interesting challenges that the region and the nation will face later this year is how these very same students will return to a strong educational system. I'm pleased to introduce Maurice Flurie to Harrisburg Rotary. Reese is the CEO of Commonwealth Charter Academy, the largest virtual learning program in the state of Pennsylvania for K through 12. Out of an idea, Reese created the academy to represent nearly 11,000 K through 12 students last year. Each of these students and the parents that have supported the school's curriculum participate in a well-developed academic program delivered virtually. For them, the experience of learning from home was what many have been participating in for some time. It's part of the vision that Dr. Flurie and his team have been working to create and continually improving. As Dr. Flurie's team prepares for the 2020-2021 academic year, they're expecting an additional 5,000 students, a nearly 40% increase off of 2019-2020's program. From a technology infrastructure perspective, it's a great story. From a business leadership perspective, it's an even better one. Today, Reese plans to share some of his thoughts on the changing dynamics of education and the educational system as it navigates this pandemic. And then Dr. Flurie plans to pivot to reflect on what all of us might want to consider as we wrestle with this new reality of working from home and or working remotely. You see, next Tuesday is Maurice's last day as CEO of Commonwealth Charter. In a well-organized and communicated transition plan announced last year, Reese is pivoting his personal life into a new career, this time that of educating others, educating and consulting with others in what they can do virtually too. Reese is applying these experiences to help educate businesses and organizations leverage a virtual workforce. So this is a very apt conversation for this time. I hope you each enjoy getting to know Dr. Flurie as I have. Please welcome him to Harrisburg Rotary.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate that introduction. Let me just a few caveats in the beginning. I hope the sound is good. My neighbor's lawn care service decided to show up, so I switched to a wired headset so everything can be heard a little bit better and the background noise won't come through. I also want to be clear, as was described, I still am technically the president and CEO of Commonwealth Charter Academy, but only for another week yet. So as I speak today, I speak more as Maurice Flurie, the CEO and founder of the Flurie Solutions Group, because I don't want anybody to think that this is what I say today is the feelings of our board of directors at CCA or I'm representing them, although I will talk a lot about the school. When we originally talked about this discussion, I looked back through some notes. I was trying to remember, I think the last time I spoke to the Rotary, to the Harrisburg Rotary, was when the first year I became the CEO about a decade ago. I didn't realize it was that long until I started to look through some notes. So thank you for inviting me. Let me tell you a little bit about CCA and the school, then I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I came to CCA in 2009, became the CEO in 2011. They actually hired me, so I had a year and a half to transition and learn about the school. At the time, when I came in 2009, the school had about 80 employees, and we served about 2,000 students. I had about a year to work with the board, work with the staff, and talk about what we really wanted to do as far as education and our program and what we thought the future could be. The board of directors, to their credit, said, you come up with a vision. Tell us what you think the potential are. At the time, I had 25 years in public education, and they gave me the autonomy to try to make some of these decisions. So 6 months later, I came to them with a plan to look at education a little bit differently. The two biggest differences with CCA has nothing to do with the fact that it's a virtual school. The number one, and I think the biggest reason we've grown from 2,000 to nearly 12,000 students in the decade and growing from 80 employees to over 700 employees, and we went from 2 locations to now we're getting ready to add our 15th and 16th location across the state, is that we look at our school as a partnership with the parent in the education of that child. And that is something very unique to public education. Our teachers are mandated to talk to the parent a minimum of every 2 weeks. Every parent can sit in on every single lesson with their child. We actually invite preschoolers to come into lessons with kindergartners. We think that resonated with families, that we looked at this as a partnership, that we didn't keep parents at arm's length, and we didn't keep that distance between the school and them. We also were very cautious that we never overstepped our bounds and gave parenting advice to parents unless it was asked, unless they came to us and said, help me support this middle schooler, help me support, motivate my child. And I think that resonated with families. That was a big part of our growth. The second reason I think our school grew, and we have some of a unique place in education, is our primary focus is on family sustaining careers. whatever that means. For some students, that may mean a good high school education and going on to a certification or a training program. For other students, that may mean another decade of formal education, a bachelor's degree, master's degree, med school, whatever. But we work with the family very early on to help set that direction for the child based on their desires and their capabilities and what their likes and interests are. So I think that's what makes our school unique. We have 3 unique facilities across the Commonwealth. Many in the Harrisburg area are very similar with are familiar with our Capitol Campus facility right across from Hack, right beside Hack and right across from the Farm Show building. That's our aquaponics facility. It's 6,000 square feet, public accessible aquaponics facility. And we grow for 3 or 4 restaurants in the area, as well as the Central Pennsylvania Food Bank, entirely student run. About 400 students operate that system and make it work, from supply chain management to the actual production within the facility to the actual distribution of the produce. Right now, we're in the process of finishing a facility in the Pittsburgh region that will be TechWorks, which is technology and telecommunications. And the other big facility, we just purchased the facility. The build out we're called during this year is MedWorks near Philadelphia in the Malvern area. Those are the 3 biggest employment sectors in Pennsylvania. We think it appropriate that a Pennsylvania public school train students in those areas with the greatest employment needs in our Commonwealth. So that's a little bit about the background of CCA. A little bit about my background and why I think my phone's been ringing off the hook a little bit lately with the pandemic. I've been in public education since 1983. I've been in public education in Pennsylvania since 1985. Traditional roles, went from teacher, department chair, assistant principal, the whole way to assistant superintendent in central office until I made the jump to the charter and cyber charter world in 2009. But a lot of my background outside of education, I got my bachelor's degree and 1 master's degree in education, but my other master's degree and my master's degree and doctorate and other study that I've done has all been in business and organizational management. It's been how to help organizations expand, strategically look at what they do, and really get creative within the making new markets for themselves or changing a current market. I think obviously with what many businesses have gone through since COVID hit, worldwide, people are looking at what their workforce could be like, what their business delivery model could be like, and if they need to pivot, make minor changes or make major changes within their business. And that's what I hope to get to a little bit at the end of the discussion. I love questions and answers. That's kind of what gets my juices flowing when people have questions about what I do. So I've been asked to focus on the pandemic, talk about our public education system and what businesses may have learned. All right, so let's ask a couple questions right up front. And I'm going to pivot to some notes. So I have a little bit better screen to look at here. Let me open this up. So what did this pandemic show us about our public schools? Here's my opinion. I think it demonstrated that our public schools have not changed significantly in their delivery model or their organizational structure for about 70 to 100 years. And I have to ask another question. How many of your businesses or the organizations you work in are you still using the same delivery model? You're still structured the same you were at the turn of the century or even the turn of the last century. How many businesses are still like that? There are some. I've actually been working with some businesses that say, we haven't changed how we do business for 100 years. This pandemic kind of showed us we need to rethink things. And when you look back to your schooling, how many, if you have children or grandchildren, are they going to school pretty much just like you did? There's small infusions of technology. They may have a device that they bring home or an iPad or a laptop. There may be smart boards in classrooms, but school buildings are pretty similar, just modernized. But the delivery system and how information is processed and how students learn or how the information is provided to the students has really not changed much. Now, I want to back up a little bit and put things in context because my comments sound a little bit critical, and they are. I won't apologize for that. I think I have a right for being in public education for 40 years. If I think I've kind of earned my stripes to be able to criticize the system I've worked in for 4 decades. I think that gives me a right to have an opinion. So let me back up just a minute. First of all, I think our public education system is the single most important institution in our country, maybe close to our medical system. And there's a couple reasons for that. It's fundamental, in my opinion, it's fundamental to our nation's ability to maintain our system of government. I think what we're currently seeing in our country, and I'm not talking political leanings here, but I think what we're seeing is the ramifications of an ignorance of some fundamental principles are starting to manifest itself in our country. What I think it shows is an absence in the ability to consume information, to think critically, and really discern content as fact or fiction or opinion. And what that shows, I think, is so many people can be swayed because they haven't developed those critical thinking skills of processing and discerning information. We're seeing all sides of this, no matter what side of the political aisle you may or may not be on, you're seeing this on both sides. A lot of the conflicts I think we're facing right now in our country, and the inability to have good debate and discourse with each other, is because the schools are no longer seeing it as their mission and primary mission to talk about our governance system and that critical thinking and how that applies to it. We've become fixated on test scores and comparisons of districts based on test scores. And I think that's inhibited some of the creative thinking of our students, some of the creativity of our teachers to work on some of these fundamental skills. So I don't want to get into politics. That's not the point of my discussion. But I think it does have a political impact on our country if we have a consumer and a society that cannot critically think and discern information correctly and appropriately. So I want to kind of be like Switzerland with politics from the rest of this. I'm going to be very, very neutral, but I also want to look critically at what we do in our educational system. Let me ask a couple questions and think through these. Why do we warehouse students from 14 to 18 years old in this thing called high schools? Why do we do that? We're one of the few countries in the world that requires students from the ages of 14 to 18 to come to a physical building and be schooled. Many countries, formal education ends at 16. And I'm talking developed countries, not third world. Students at 16 begin specific training for careers or adult life. We keep students till 18 warehoused in a high school. Why do we still focus on college? And schools kind of pound their chest on college preparatory programs when the majority of jobs needed right now in our country, family sustaining jobs, are going unfilled in the trades with significantly less debt and a much greater need. Why are we not encouraging entrepreneurs to go into the trades in some of these certifications programs? Sometimes we can't bridge entrepreneurship with the trades. We see those as two disjointed concepts. Well, actually, some of our most successful business people in the capital region started as tradesmen and then grew a business from there, if you look at many of the businesses in the Harrisburg area. I'm actually working at a project right now with the UK where they're actually looking at those family sustaining careers and saying, how do we build our secondary education program that it's a career focus and not simply college focus? Now, for many careers, it requires formal education post high school, post your public school days. But how do we get more strategic with this? I think gone are the days economically where a student can go to college to find themselves. There's too big a financial penalty without the college education being strategic and designed to a specific career. Another question I think we have to ask, especially in public education, the K-12 education world, is why is there no system to monitor fiscal thoughtfulness and stewardship of taxpayer dollars? Now, all schools are audited. All schools are audited, but the audit is really to catch misdeeds or mistakes. You know, it's to say this wasn't accounted for correctly, or you overspent here, or misdeeds that may have happened in the governance at some schools. But there's no metric to look at schools and the efficiency in which they use taxpayer dollars. And let's face it, all of us sitting here, outside of our income tax, for most of us, our biggest expenditure to our community is our school taxes. It's one of the biggest taxing agents in many communities. Dirty little secret, and I think this is something that needs rectified sooner than later. I rectified it in my own career because I understood shortcomings in my own education. To become a superintendent in the state of Pennsylvania, you need one budgeting course. You need no courses in finance or background in finance. Now, oftentimes school districts have, you know, CPAs and business people that work within the business office, but the person that's kind of in that preeminent chair in that public education institution does not require any financial background. They just have to be, they're only taught budgeting as part of the superintendent's eligibility program. I realized that that was a huge gap in my knowledge base. So I started to take some courses in an MBA program. I never finished it because I quite frankly didn't want to do the accounting courses. I wanted the business and the finance background, but I didn't find the necessity to go through the accounting courses. To all my accounting friends out there that may be on this, God bless you. But that's not in my wheelhouse of enjoyment or what I'm very, very good at. I'm not a detailed enough person to handle accounting well. So I think that's something we have to talk about, because our current educational system almost rewards the system with the most financially dysfunctional performance. We pour more money into those that are most challenged or to those that have had the biggest problem making their ends meet. And so what happens, we have a tendency to collectively pour into those entities. Now, here's the kind of the overriding question. Will the pandemic change things in public education? Here's a big cop out. It depends. I think it depends on how long it goes on. I think if we somehow go back to school sometime this fall and it's pretty much business as usual with students in classrooms, I think there'll be very little strong incentive to change and move that system. That's a system that everybody within the system has been trained in, from the teachers teaching in the classroom to the administrators administering the program to the school board directors. That's the system they grew up in. That's how they were educated. So I think there's going to be very little motivation for long-term systematic change unless the pandemic proves that our current system may not be viable for a period of time. Then I think you're going to see some modernization in how we deliver instruction to students. Start leveraging technology. Don't be so dependent on face-to-face instruction. And quite frankly, trust kids to do the right thing when it comes to their own learning and their own education. That's something I find is teaching in a virtual environment, even students that are struggling learners. 70% of our students come to us 1 or more years behind academically. When their education becomes their education and they have the autonomy to make some decisions with their education, it's phenomenal what they do and what they can accomplish and how they step up because now they're in charge. Now some questions for business in the last 5 or 6 minutes or so. A lot of questions I'm not going to give you answers because answers are different for every entity. Unlike schools, you have to adapt to become fiscally viable. You have to financially survive. Many of you are not relying on taxpayer dollars. Many of you are not relying on government funding. You're in the private sector or not-for-profit sector where you have to, prove your fiscal responsibility and tighten the belt on a regular basis. But here's a few questions for you. What work environments changes will you make now since you've worked this way with the pandemic? Are you having discussions within your organization on what it will look like if the pandemic disappears? Will you maintain some of the same things you're still doing? How was your efficiency impacted during the pandemic? I was recently in discussions with a trucking company, one of the most traditional companies, industries in our country. They found that they had an increase of efficiency by having many of their logistics people at home. Because they were at home, they could concentrate on what they were doing. They didn't get many of the distractions of people stopping in cubes or stopping in offices. They're really continuing, many of their logistics and purchasing people be non-office based anymore. They're looking to make them more virtual. And how will you leverage technology going forward? Will you have virtual staff development? How do you do that? Karen mentioned about her husband being a firefighter. I'm in a project right now with University of Hull in England. They're using virtual reality to train site commanders in the fire industry in England. So rather than put them in these certain dangerous situations or mock-ups, they're using virtual reality to put them in command of certain scenarios that they can adjust and then account for that later. The engineers that work on the wind turbines, they're training them through virtual reality to make sure they can actually climb one of those towers and work on a windmill. They're leveraging technology to reduce cost and get more sophisticated with their training. And finally, what about artificial intelligence for analytics? Have you really thoughtfully analyzed your productivity during this crisis? Or like many organizations, and understandable, this isn't to be critical, we're really flying by the seat of their pants these last few months. We're just trying to keep it together and trying to be functional. All right. So the last one I want to talk to those of you in a client service type business, what will your client service model look like? I was just in discussions with a law firm that are actually going to minimize their offices. They found that they increased billable hours and were more available to their clients in a virtual model using Zoom. You can do a virtual deposition right now. I was actually in a deposition a month ago that was all done virtually. Including me that was testifying. And so this law firm is really going to reduce their footprint physically because they found they served clients better and increased billable hours by working virtually. Right? Want to make sure I leave time for questions. I want to be very considerate of my time constraints. Again, I gave nobody any answers. That was really my goal. But I wanted you to think about what we've learned from this. I'll finish with just one little comment. One thing people talk about virtual education, and I think you found this in the workplace, maybe many of you. It's disconnected. Where do we learn these social skills? How do we learn how people feel? We need that face-to-face. If you talk to teachers and students that are educated virtually, and I mean a good sound educational program, not just curriculum in a box type program that many systems are, they actually feel, the teachers feel they know the students better, and the students feel they know the teachers better than they ever did in a traditional classroom. And that's a survey of teachers that have taught in both and students that have gone to both. That was probably the biggest shock to me when I started working in a virtual cyber charter school, that they actually felt they knew each other better because of the one-on-one time that was afforded to them. So I want to open it up for questions. I'm not sure who's going to queue them up or ask them. I don't know if it's James, if you're going to do that, or somebody else, but I'm open.
Each week I do the best possible with questions coming in the chat function here. Let's start with one from Joe Bedard. He says, Maurice, any ideas on how we as a society can impact kindergarten readiness in the population in low income areas? And before you answer the question, I just want to say thank you for the presentation. Everybody give Maurice a hand if you could for putting a lot of questions in front of us like that. So on to the question, impacting kindergarten readiness in the population in low income areas.
Sure. The lower the poverty level in the community, I believe the earlier you need to intervene. And I don't mean intervene as to, usurp the parent responsibility, but when those students literally are born in the hospital, that first gift box of books needs to be there. So that those children, early literacy is the key. We get these children reading early, they will learn when they get to kindergarten. It's the students that are devoid of books and literature in the homes that struggle when they get to kindergarten. So if we can increase that early literacy by giving parents some of those resources, literally before they leave the hospital, that can have a huge impact in these lower income communities.
Thank you. Let's kind of take a little dive into the area of special needs, if we could. Could you talk for a minute about public education and career readiness for children with special needs?
Sure. Actually, we're working closely right now with Autism Speaks in just that arena. In the virtual environment, we've got to be able to do some of that job training virtually, or have a group that works across the state with a group of students. In traditional high schools, what we've got to do, and I don't mean this as a derogatory term, just because a student has special needs, do not dumb down their career education. Don't give them menial tasks to do. Use their gifts. In the traditional IEP process, which has always appalled me, but it's kind of the basis that we look at. Okay, here's a student with a learning disability. What do we have to do to get them to do things like their non-disabled peers? Instead, I believe it should be, okay, this student has certain limitations, there's certain challenges they might have educationally. What are their skills and what are their gifts? How do we leverage that to a career? You know, so a kid has terrible handwriting. So what? Why should we make them handwrite more? Let them keyboard, let them use their strengths and be trained for careers. A lot of it is we don't have good dialogue yet within our communities between the schools and the employers. There's a couple. Bermudian Springs High School has a tremendous program that they put together as part of their high school for the careers in that region. But that's very few and far between. Superintendents need to do a better job of serving their community businesses and talk about what those needs are, because many students with disabilities can fill those needs immediately or immediately after high school. And then many of those businesses are willing to do that additional job training and education for that employee when they get in. The reason it's not happening is we have a gap with the businesses talking to the schools. They've stayed in their silos too much. And as business people, schools can be very off-putting sometimes, trying to get into them. When you want to talk about what their needs are, sometimes it just feels like your comments are falling on deaf ears. But I think the schools need to embrace the employers more. That's part of your community service component of your school.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you. Ellen, comments, schools have become quasi-social service organizations, from meals to mandated reporters for child abuse. Now that that's baked into the system, how do we take those services away from the children who need it the most?
Well, I don't really know if we need to take them away, but we have to put it in perspective, and not let them be the sole purpose of the school. They need to have their place, but I don't think it needs to run the school, I guess, for lack of a better term. Yeah, you're right. I don't know if that's a genie we can put back in the bottle. The fact that schools have been that community entity for many of these social services. In many cases, let the school maybe be the place for that, but why do school personnel have to be the ones to fulfill that function? Maybe it be community-based services that are being provided rather than the school providing it. But I don't know if we'll get that genie back in the bottle, but I think sometimes as school leaders, we focus too much on those community service portions of the school and not enough on the true preparedness for students to go out into our general greater community.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you. Patty Pediprolu says, in-person education teaches much more than facts and figures in terms of social interactions, playtime, lunch for some kids who really need them, etc., a safe haven, so to speak. And I think you might have touched on this a bit as you were speaking, but how are these going to be created or translated virtually?
Okay. Well, I think there's two parts to that argument. First is many parents that enroll their children in our environment get it real excited because now they have more flexibility socially, because they're not bound by the school clock. They can go and meet a group of friends at 9, 10, 11 in the morning and do their schooling at a different time of the day. They can take more advantage of YMCA programs, community-based programs, or just meet other kids in the neighborhood that are schooling like they are. Plus, I think here's something we have to remember too. Not all the social interaction in schools is realistic or appropriate. My kids learned a lot of things on the bus I wish they wouldn't have, or at least not at the age they learned them. Plus, you also have to think about it. If we're preparing kids to be productive citizens, in a traditional school environment, you're socializing, but you're socializing with kids from your community, the same age as you, often that look like you, and have had the same experiences of you. If you broaden that, and this is one of the things I celebrate about our school, and I have so many stories I could tell about it. You're now in a class with a student from Tioga County will be in a student with West Philadelphia, or a student from Pittsburgh. And now they get to have discussions and collaborate like we do in the workplace. It's people that might be different than you, that might live in a different place, that might have a different background, that are going to contribute something else to the conversation. So in many respects, in virtual education, I almost think socially, it prepares the student for greater society than a traditional school does. I mean, my own son, I remember when he graduated from a traditional high school, decades ago, said, I went to school with the same kids for 13 years. I can't wait to go to college just to go to school with someone different. That's what it's like in many of our communities. That's not realistic social skills. Realistic social skills we need as adults is to work with people not like us, and to work with people that have different backgrounds and to contribute more. That's one of the benefits, I think, of a virtual education. It's different social learning, but I still think it's key social learning.
Mm-hmm. And maybe kind of a little follow-on to that. I mean, is there like a public survey on the topic? If so, would you be able to share that with us?
What do you mean? You mean on the topic of the social?
Mm-hmm. Social
only thing we do is our internal.
Okay.
We do our internal surveys with our parents about that social aspect. That's the only thing we really have. Do you feel there was enough social interaction time? That's one of the reasons we went from just a few field trips a year to over 500. Because it can't be all virtual. You do need some time face-to-face. So we do 500 field trips a year for the students to interact face-to-face and get shoulder to shoulder with each other.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Do you believe that the increased availability is sustainable? A new burnout is popping up from increased hours, and from the working at home is not an issue.
Well, yeah, and if you talk to people that have worked from home for a period of time, that's part of their learning curve. When you're new to working from home, there's either two things that happen to you. You realize your family is incredibly disruptive. When you're working your home working environment, you realize that as an individual, you may not be terribly structured and you get distracted. You see that home project that needs done in the middle of your workday and you have to constantly fight that. Or you don't know how to turn it off. You start working at 7 o'clock in the morning. Next thing you know, it's 9 o'clock at night, and you're like, "My gosh, I've only eaten once," and it's time for me to go to bed. That's something that's learned. It may have to be taught. It may be something someone learns on their own, but in many cases, it has to be taught. How do you manage your day? How do you sort that out? How do you do that?
Yeah. Thank you so much, Maurice. Just a lot of very thought-provoking comments, answers to questions. Let's give Maurice a hand, and if anyone, I think I've got all the questions here, but again, kick me under the table if I happen to miss yours. Sure. But again, thanks so much. We really appreciated having you here with us today, and thanks for the work that you're doing as well.
Thank you. And if anybody wants me to kind of come into your workplace and kind of poke management teams to make them think differently, I can do that as aggressively or as calmly and kindly as you'd like me to. Some groups have said, I want you to scare the you-know-what out of them. And other groups have said, I want you to kind of nudge them and nurture them along. I'm more than willing to do that with your management teams or your organizations.
Sure. Great. Thank you. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Well, next week's meeting will be our 2019-2020 year in review, and we'll be reaching out and getting a lot of our committee chairs involved in helping to present that. And there might even be a couple more surveys. We think it's going to be fun. Make sure you attend the meeting and learn all about the stories, the exciting stories that are happening right here in the Rotary Club of Harrisburg. Beyond next week, I am sure, I'm absolutely sure that you may be wondering when, how, if we plan to reopen the Rotary Club of Harrisburg. So there are actually several moving parts in an answer to this question. Number one being safety. It is important to us that everyone is safe and that we are safe and healthy. Number two being that our program committee has been in touch with a number of speakers that work really well in a virtual format. By just, show of hands or an applause, let's give it up for the program committee. These folks are doing a great job in helping our program be right on track. So, again, balancing the speakers that are available to be working or to be presenting to us in a virtual format. Number three being the regulations and accommodations that are available at the Hilton. And number four, certainly how you all, each one of you, feel and interact, and how you feel about being in either a virtual setting or a physical setting. So there are at least four moving parts that we're looking at. Stay tuned. Somewhere along the way, we'll probably be sending out a survey. So make sure you click on the survey and answer those questions. But we'll be working on that as a board coming up in our July meeting. And I wanted to just get that out on the table so that everyone knows that, we're working in this kind of uncertain environment, but we are working at moving forward, keeping the Rotary engine running. We appreciate you all. Every single one of you. Thank you for being a part of the Rotary Club of Harrisburg. We love you. Make it a great Rotary week.